Let's cut the noise. You don't need another filter, another crash diet, or someone else's approval to be attractive. You just need to see what's already there. Too many women walk through life dimming their light, apologizing for taking up space, and second-guessing their value. But attraction isn't about validation from the outside, it's about power from the inside. Today I'm here to show you the 5 subtle but powerful signs that you're an attractive woman, even if you haven't realized it yet. And once you do, there's no turning back. You walk into the room and something shifts. No words, no exaggerated movements, no effort to be noticed, and yet you are. It's not the dress, it's not the lipstick, it's the way you carry yourself like you belong, without needing anyone to confirm it. That's the part you don't always see in yourself, but others do. That quiet confidence, that invisible pull. That's not luck, that's raw feminine energy, and it is deeply undeniably attractive. Not because it screams, but because it whispers slowly and deliberately to every soul that comes near. People often think being attractive is about being loud, flirtatious, or overtly sexual, but those who truly understand intimacy know it's much deeper. The most captivating women don't rush to be seen. They simply exist in their own rhythm, and that rhythm speaks to something primal. When you're connected to yourself, your emotions, your desires, your breath, you exude a presence that doesn't just take up space, it owns it. You don't have to arch your back or raise your voice. You just are, and that's enough. That's where the intimacy begins. Not with a kiss, not in the bedroom, but with the way you look someone in the eye when you speak, the way your voice drops just slightly when you say something real, the way you pause to listen not to please but because you're curious, because your energy is soft but not submissive, strong but not hard. You aren't trying to impress, you're letting them witness. That is intimacy before touch, that is seduction through self-awareness. It's in the way you don't fidget, in the way you take your time, in the way you don't need validation to feel desired because you already are in your own eyes. And when someone tries to enter your space romantically, sexually, emotionally, they're not just stepping into your life, they're stepping into your energy field. And trust me, they feel it. You are the kind of woman who doesn't chase, doesn't beg, and doesn't mold herself to be wanted. You've stopped shrinking for proximity. You've learned that presence is more powerful than pursuit. And in doing so, you've become unforgettable. Not because of what you show, but because of what you withhold. The mystery, the restraint, the knowing. And that is what creates the tension that makes intimacy electric. People may not always be able to describe what it is about you that pulls them in, but they feel safer around you, more seen, more curious. You awaken something in them. Not because you're performing, but because you're rooted. You've tapped into your feminine intelligence, the sensual, emotional, intuitive flow that speaks through your gaze, your stillness, your unapologetic being. Attraction begins there, in that space between words, in that energy that says, I don't need to prove myself, I am myself. That is what makes people crave you before they ever touch you. That's what ignites real intimacy before the first kiss, before the first embrace. It's not your body they feel first, it's your energy. There is something wildly magnetic about a woman who knows where the line is and isn't afraid to hold it. Boundaries, when rooted in self-worth, don't repel people, they draw the right ones in. Because intimacy without boundaries is chaos dressed up as closeness. And when you as a woman understand that your body, your emotions, your time, and your presence are sacred, you stop giving discounts just to be liked. You stop over-explaining, over-apologizing, over-accommodating. Instead, you stand still. And in that stillness, there's power, there's seduction, there's unshakable attraction. You may not realize it yet, but the moment you say no without flinching, without softening your voice to be more digestible, you activate something in the air. That no isn't rejection, it's clarity. And for those who are worthy of your intimacy, that clarity is irresistible, because boundaries are the foreplay of emotional safety. They are the signal that says, if you want access to me, it has to be earned with presence, not pressure. A woman who sets boundaries becomes unforgettable, not for what she allows, but for what she doesn't. She doesn't entertain games. She doesn't entertain halfway love. She doesn't confuse attention with affection. She's not interested in being almost loved, almost chosen, almost respected. She doesn't flinch when someone walks away. She understands that every exit only clears space for what is meant to arrive. Her energy isn't desperate, it's clean. And that cleanness is what makes people come back, often haunted by the way she made them feel, held, seen, and stretched without being smothered. When you hold your boundaries in intimacy, you create tension. The good kind, the slow burn. You show that you are not available on command, that your touch, your trust, your vulnerability must be earned, that you won't be rushed into connection, that you honor your nervous system, your body's wisdom, your intuition, and if something feels off, you pause. That pause is your power, because it says, I won't sacrifice my peace to be desired. People might test your lines, they might call you difficult, guarded, or too much. But those labels come from people who benefit when women stay small. A woman who can say enough is dangerous to those who rely on compliance, but to those who are ready for depth, for honesty, for mutual desire, she is magnetic, she is unforgettable, she is the standard. Your boundaries are not walls, they are invitations. Invitations to those who can meet you fully. Invitations to a deeper kind of intimacy, where communication replaces assumption, where consent replaces expectation, where emotional availability replaces emotional manipulation. Your no sets the stage for a more powerful, more connected, more real kind of yes. And that yes isn't passive, it's a conscious choice. It's rooted in mutual respect, it's electric. Because when you choose someone from a place of power, not need, the connection that follows is no longer a transaction, it becomes transformation. There's a different kind of intimacy that radiates from a woman who doesn't need to announce herself to feel seen. She doesn't compete, she doesn't compare, she doesn't contort herself to fit into whatever mold society deems desirable this week. She's past that, because she's realized something most people never do. True attraction isn't about being louder, flashier, or more perfect. It's about being rooted in your own energy so deeply that your presence lingers even after you've left the room. That's what makes her unforgettable. That's what makes intimacy with her feel sacred. You don't need to keep up with anyone else when you're already in rhythm with yourself. That stillness inside of you, that sense of calm, that's your power. You've outgrown the need to chase trends or perform a certain version of femininity that was never truly yours to begin with. Instead, you've learned to seduce through authenticity. When others dress for the male gaze, you dress to reflect your mood, your sensuality, your inner knowing. When others post for validation, you move in silence, letting your energy do the talking. When others mimic, you embody. That distinction is what creates real intimacy, not just in romance but in how the world responds to you. And intimacy, real intimacy, thrives on individuality. When a man feels like you're not trying to impress him but simply letting him witness you, it disarms him. It pulls him out of performance and into presence. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You don't need to take off more clothing to be desired. There's a depth in you that can't be copied, a richness in your self-awareness that makes people lean in without even realizing why. You're the woman who can make silence feel sexy, who can turn the act of sipping tea, walking barefoot, or tying your hair up into something completely mesmerizing. Because it's not the action, it's the energy behind it. You're not rushing to catch up, you're not stuck in the loop of comparison. You know your value isn't diluted by someone else's highlight reel. And that unshakable self-trust, that's the very thing people crave when they don't even know what they're looking for. There's a sensuality in your restraint, a power in your refusal to explain yourself, a calm in your choices. When someone gets close to you, they quickly realize they're not dealing with a woman who needs constant attention to feel alive. They're facing a woman who chooses intimacy, who cultivates it, who knows how to hold eye contact and silence without fidgeting, without fear. That self-composure isn't cold, it's magnetic. It's the doorway to a different kind of relationship, one that's based on depth, not demand, curiosity, not control. You don't follow anyone else's path, you've created your own. And in doing so, you've become a quiet storm, a sensual force, the kind of woman who doesn't need to be seen by the world to feel significant, because you've already seen yourself. And that is what changes the entire energy of every room you walk into. There's an undeniable magic in the way you hold space for others. You don't overpower a room to be felt, you simply exist with such quiet certainty that people naturally find themselves drawn to you. You listen, not because you're trying to be liked, but because you genuinely care. You make others feel seen without dissecting yourself in the process. And that's intimacy on a level most people never reach. Because true connection isn't just about vulnerability, it's about knowing when to open your soul and when to guard your peace. You do both with elegance. In a world that screams for attention, your stillness is intoxicating. While some women shrink themselves to make others feel comfortable, you've stopped playing that game. You don't water yourself down, you don't dim your brilliance just to make someone else feel big. Your energy says, I'll hold space for you, but I won't erase myself for your comfort. And in doing so, you teach people how to show up fully, honestly, and without the performance. Your presence has this rare ability to soothe and challenge at the same time. You offer warmth, but never at the expense of your standards. You're soft, but not spineless. You can be nurturing without becoming a sponge for someone else's chaos. And the people who meet you on that level, they feel something they didn't know they were missing. A woman who knows how to love deeply without losing herself in the process. That's where your power lies. Not in your willingness to give endlessly, but in your refusal to abandon yourself just to be chosen. You've learned the art of emotional containment. You know when to lean in and when to step back. You don't chase clarity, you become it. In your presence, people don't just feel seen, they feel stripped bare in the best way because you mirror back to them the parts they've hidden, avoided, or ignored. Intimacy with you isn't chaotic, it's intentional, it's grounded. And that kind of intimacy changes people. You don't beg to be understood, you don't explain your worth like it's a debate, you don't need anyone to approve of your boundaries in order to honor them. You allow people to come closer, but only if they come correct, with integrity, with truth, with real presence. Because the door to you doesn't open for charm, it opens for character. People might call you mysterious, but it's not mystery, it's mastery. You've mastered your own emotional landscape, you've met your own shadows, you know what lights you up and what dims your flame. And when you connect with someone, it's not about filling a void, it's about mutual expansion, a dance of emotional intelligence, an energy exchange that's both grounding and electrifying. You're the kind of woman who can listen to someone's pain without needing to fix it, who can hold a gaze without flinching, who can say, "I understand you," and mean it, not from a place of neediness, but from wholeness. That's why people feel safe with you, not because you bend, but because you honor, not because you absorb, but because you reflect, not because you give endlessly, but because you give with discernment. You've outgrown the need to be touched without being understood. You're no longer impressed by the thrill of attention when it's not backed by intention. You crave something deeper now, something that feels like safety and surrender, not noise and performance. You're the kind of woman who sees intimacy not as a moment, but as a language. You feel in tones, in energy shifts, in the pauses between words, and the way you relate. It's not casual, it's not careless, it's conscious. You don't just want to be seen, you want to be felt, known, studied, remembered, not for how you look in the light, but for how you move in the dark. There's a rhythm in you that no one can fake. You read people with your whole body, you pick up on the tone behind the tone, the energy behind the compliment, the silence behind the conversation. And when you open up to someone, when you decide to let someone in, it's not just physical, it's a spiritual reveal, it's emotional nakedness. It's you saying, "This is my inner world, handle it with care," and very few people have the capacity to meet you there, but when they do, the connection becomes unforgettable. You understand that sex without emotional safety feels empty, and emotional safety without chemistry feels hollow. You want both, you deserve both. You've learned that true intimacy begins long before bodies meet. It starts with trust, with a shared gaze that lingers a little longer than it should, with a conversation that slips under the surface and stays there, with the courage to be honest, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. You want to be touched where it really matters, in the soul, in the mind, in the spaces most people are too afraid to reach. You can no longer pretend that surface-level affection satisfies you. The small talk bores you, the predictable compliments do nothing. You want someone who pays attention to your emotional landscape, the way an artist studies every brushstroke, slowly, deliberately, reverently. Because for you, intimacy is art. It's sacred. It's not about just having someone in your bed. It's about having someone who can stand in your storm and still choose softness. Someone who knows how to undress your thoughts before they reach for your skin. You don't hand out your softness to those who haven't earned it. You don't play small in love anymore. You ask hard questions. You hold still when others panic. You give people the space to show who they really are, and you listen. You watch. You feel. And that ability to sit in the full complexity of connection without flinching, that's your edge. That's what makes you dangerous in the best way. Because you don't confuse closeness with chemistry. You don't mistake being needed for being loved. You've come to understand that real intimacy doesn't always look like passion. Sometimes it looks like stillness, like peace, like finally being in the presence of someone who doesn't just want your body but wants to know how you breathe, what you dream, what you fear. And you're done settling for anything less than that kind of presence, that kind of touch, that kind of love. There's something undeniably powerful about a woman who's no longer afraid of her own desire. Not just sexual desire, but the deep, aching, soul-level hunger to be touched, seen, adored, and understood. You've stopped apologizing for wanting more. You've stopped pretending you're fine with shallow affection, with half-truths, with connections that leave you wondering instead of glowing. Because now you understand that pleasure isn't something you wait for, it's something you own. You don't need permission to want. You don't need to be chosen to feel worthy. You've made a decision to be the kind of woman who turns herself on, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, before anyone else ever gets the chance. You've stepped into a space where you can finally say, I want depth, I want fire, I want tenderness, I want the kind of intimacy that leaves fingerprints on my soul. And when you say that, it's not desperation, it's clarity. You've been through enough to know what doesn't serve you. The performative love, the shallow praise, the transactional dynamics where you give too much and receive too little. You're no longer subscribing to those games. You've rewritten the rules and now they're rooted in embodiment, not approval. When you walk into a room, it's not your looks alone that draw attention, it's the energy of a woman who knows what she's capable of feeling. You don't seduce through surface, you seduce through self-knowing. Your eye contact says, I won't be easy to access, but if you're worthy, you'll never forget the experience. That is not ego. That is intimacy backed by integrity. Because for you, pleasure isn't just about what happens between the sheets, it's about what happens in the moments before, in the pause, in the breath, in the build-up of trust and truth. You don't rush it, you savor it. You've stopped chasing love that exhausts you. You've realized that true sensuality comes from within, not from being validated, not from being wanted, but from being connected to your own senses. Your body is no longer something to hide or fix. It's your compass, your truth teller, your home. You've made peace with your edges, your curves, your softness, your fire. You understand now that when you touch yourself with thoughts, with words, with hands, you are remembering that you are your first and longest love. And the more you return to yourself, the more magnetic you become. What makes you deeply attractive isn't just how you look, it's how you receive. The way you open without losing yourself, the way you melt without collapsing, the way you let someone in, only if they come to witness, not to consume. You don't play small anymore in pleasure. You ask for what you want, you give yourself what you need. And anyone who enters that sacred space with you has to rise to meet you there with presence, with patience, with praise that sees beyond the physical. Because you no longer live in a body that's ashamed of desire. You live in a body that remembers it was born for connection, for touch, for pleasure, for truth. And when you embrace that truth without apology, you become the kind of woman people don't just want to be with, they want to worship.